Hello, and welcome. My name is Rupert Honywood, and I'm your personal estate agent, and I'm really keen to share some top tips with you, which might be worth your consideration. And in particular, today we're going to look at the 7 top things you should consider when buying your new home. Now, new home means it could be brand new, or it could be even a much older property, but something that you're planning to move into. Now, the first thing to consider is the importance of location. As best as you can, try and afford a property or obtain a property which is in the best possible area that you can afford. What you'll tend to find is properties which are in highly desirable areas, even in a fairly quiet market, will still tend to sell. Make sure as well that it's very well linked for commuting and for schools. Even if you don't have a need for a good schooling yourself, that in itself can be important later on should you decide to sell your home in 4 or 5 years' time. And also consider what other things that go on in the local area in terms of perhaps local development plans, which could, for example, impact the value of your property both positively or negatively at some future date. The other part really, which is important, is to look at your budgeting and financing. Make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row, that you've got a good credit score, or do things as well as you can to improve your credit score. And these days, they will do a lot of affordability checks as well. And for example, if a property has got fairly high maintenance charges or ground rent, that can be a real challenge because it can be deemed to affect your affordability, and therefore the multiple is actually used to help you get a mortgage on your new property. The other consideration, of course, is to do with condition. If a property is run down, that isn't necessarily a bad thing because that can present a massive opportunity for improvement. And of course, you can create the home according to what you actually want. But what you do have to consider is any obvious structural defects. I think look at things like the roof, look for any obvious signs of cracking in the walls, look for dampness. That could be very minor due to lack of ventilation, or it could be a sign of much wider problems. And pay particular attention to the plumbing electrical systems as well. And as part of that, energy efficiency comes in as being a very important consideration, especially now as regulations are getting tighter and tighter. If you can, try and find a property which has got an energy rating of at least band C or above. Now, in real terms, with properties which are older, perhaps 1960s or 1930s or even Victorian houses, they can have real trouble getting up to a band C. Now, it's not the end of the world if you can't get there, but it just means that certainly if you choose to rent out your home later on, it's those type of things that can be looked at, and legislation is getting increasingly tight in those areas, so it's always worth making sure you're buying into the future. And then things like the size and layout is important. Is the way the living accommodation has been well designed to meet your current and future standards? And don't underestimate the amount of downstairs space you need. It's really interesting. 10, 15 years ago, used to be the number of bedrooms, which is the most important consideration. And it's still a very important consideration. But actually nowadays, living space, having separate work areas or even a room for a study is particularly important, especially with home working and the way our lives have now changed and the way they're likely to change a lot over the next few years as well. Ideally look for a property which has got potential to add more space on. So it might be there's a potential to build upwards or sideways. Again, that is really good, both in terms of giving you flexibility, but also helping to increase the value of your home in the medium long term. And that leads really well into the sort of real resale value. Factor in local market trends, look at things like whether there's any risk of flooding in the area, look at crime statistics. You might think this type of information is quite difficult to find out, but a lot of it's available on things like Rightmove and Zoopla, or there's some other tools you can use to find out this information. In fact, even your local estate agent should be able to guide you quite a little bit on that. In particular, look at any planning that's going on, any changes to roads or schools or massive building projects which are going to be going on in your area. Now, sometimes if there are some building projects going in your area, that's not a bad thing, because sometimes that can actually increase the value of property nearby. But actually, if it's done not in sympathy with the local area, or it could be you'll be directly overlooking a building development, then obviously that can have a negative impact. And then finally, just do a bit of a drive around the local neighbourhood, even knock on a few doors, and find out what other people think of the area. Check noise, traffic levels, and the general overall vibe. And talk to neighbours at different times of day to ensure that you are getting a wide spectrum of people who may have an interest. And don't be fooled necessarily by places which seem very quiet. For example, I personally live in a little village, happens to be called Horsemonden, and you don't see many people wandering around, but you suddenly find at certain times of the year the whole place really comes to life, and there's very much a community feel and vibe around here. And the big thing is to look at what other people are doing. Are people tending to move into the area? Are people tending to move out? Also check things like internet and broadband connectivity. What is that like? Ideally, you need a minimum these days of a broadband connectivity speed of about 60 or 70 megabytes as a minimum. And obviously, you can use websites such as speedtest.net, for example, to check that out. And that can, even if you don't need it particularly, when it comes to selling your property, people these days are expecting your home to be pretty well connected. Anyway, I think I thought of a bit more than 7 there, but hopefully you found that helpful. If you would like to discuss any questions or what you're planning to do with both either buying or selling a property, in this area, do drop me a text or a WhatsApp message, or even give me a call on 07912 600 999. And equally, I'll put my links below. So just reach out anytime, and I'll be very pleased to assist you. Thanks ever so much for taking part in today's recording.